Good morning, 7th grade. So today we're going to keep learning about sacrifices, but we're going to try to connect it a little bit more to the Mass and how the Feast of Passover has its connections in the Mass. And so we'll still see a little bit of sacrifice in there, but it's going to be a little bit more about the Feast of Passover and how it's connected to our Catholic Mass. And of course, the Feast of Passover is something that the Jewish people celebrate. So just to kind of give you guys a quick refresher, Passover was that time that we remember, that the Jewish people celebrate, because it's the time that God passed over the homes of the Jewish families during their enslavement in Egypt, and didn't kill the firstborn male. Because the Israelites were enslaved in Egypt and Pharaoh didn't want to let them go, he sent this plague, which is the death of the firstborn male, over Egypt. But so that the Israelites wouldn't be harmed because they were living in Egypt, what needed to happen was they needed to mark their door frames with blood, and they had a bunch of other little things that they had to do. They had to make unleavened bread. And so we're going to explore all of those today a little bit, so that you can see where the connections are between the celebration of Passover and the Catholic Mass. So one of the first things that we want to make sure that we look at is that we consider and that we understand that God asked the Israelites to remember what he had done for them. God asked the Israelites to never forget that he freed them from Egypt, from slavery, and he did so with this last plague. He did so by doing something that was so terrible that the Pharaoh finally rushed them out of there. Because remember, Pharaoh didn't want to let the Israelites go. Plague after plague, Pharaoh continued to say, you know what, you guys aren't going anywhere. You guys are going to stay here. It doesn't matter what Moses does. It doesn't matter what your God brings us. You're not going anywhere. And it wasn't until this death of the firstborn male, when Pharaoh's son dies, that he finally decides that the Israelites were supposed to be freed. The other thing you guys are going to read about in your section here is that the temple in Jerusalem becomes this place of celebration for this Feast of Passover. The temple in Jerusalem also becomes a place where other feasts are celebrated, but it's really kind of the center of all of these celebrations. And so that's where all the Jewish people are going to remember this great feast, to remember the fact that God helped the Israelites escape from Egypt, escape from the slavery. Finally, the last thing that you're going to read about is how our Catholic Mass has its roots in this Feast of Passover. This Feast of Passover is really at the center of the things that we celebrate, and we're going to be making a lot of connections between our Mass and the Feast of Passover. So what you're going to do for your assignment today is, we'll break it up over 2 days. Today, for the first part, what you're going to do is you're going to look and you're going to see what Passover is all about. You're going to see the different sacrifices. You're going to see the different little elements. You're going to look up some scripture passages, and you're going to answer some very short, simple questions about it. Tomorrow, we're going to look at the same thing, but we're going to look mostly in the New Testament, and we're going to see how we start making those connections to the New Testament, how we're going to start making those connections to the Catholic Mass, to this new kind of celebration that we as Catholics celebrate. And then when we're done, we'll be able to see the connection, how one leads to the other. Some of you might actually even start to be able to see the connection before we even look up some of the passages. Maybe some of you will start to make the connection as soon as you see what the Old Testament and what Passover is all about. You might start to see those. And so tomorrow, I'll make another little video, and we'll break down what these connections all are, and how and how the two are really kind of closely tied together, and how our Catholic Mass has its roots, has its beginnings in this feast of Passover. So please let me know if you have any questions. I'll be on Google Hangouts, and you can reach out to me there. Have fun.